everybody. Al Bernstein with another edition of our Hot Topic show. And on this one, I want to focus in on a fight that was recently made that I will be privileged to do the commentary on. And if it's not a hot topic, it should be. So I'm putting it out there as a hot topic. It is a rematch that will be happening on December 20th at the Fox Theater in Detroit. It'll be televised on DAZN. I will be there ringside along with my partners Corey Erdman and Raul Marquez to announce it, and it will be on DAZN, and it's promoted by Salita Promotions, and it is the rematch between K-Scott and Olivia Curry of their fantastic middleweight championship fight from September 22nd. These two women put on what I think is one of the fights of the year, but here they are still within the calendar year, already 3 months after that first fight, coming back to do it all over again. So they have a chance to have not one but two fight of the year candidates during the course of this year. This fight is going to be great. The first one was a fascinating endeavor. Kay Stevenson, known as more of a boxer, and Olivia Curry, a very solid aggression fighter. And the conventional thinking was K. Scott, would box, and she would move around, and she would try to win by boxing, and Olivia Curry would really pursue her during the course of this fight. Well, it turned out quite differently. K. Scott went in guns blazing and met the pressure of Olivia Curry head to head. And it turned out to be a fantastic match. And I think that style and that approach kind of surprised Olivia Curry and her people a little bit. And it turned out to be a great 10-round fight. One of the judges had it 98-92 for Scott. Two of the judges had it 95-95 as a draw. I'm going to say that I personally thought Scott won the fight, and I was surprised at the two draw cards. But having said that, that in no way diminishes what Olivia Curry did in that fight, and it in no way diminishes the excitement that was created. And it was certainly a well-contested, hard-fought fight. To have the rematch makes all the sense in the world. There will be, again, a middleweight crown on the line for these two women, and they're both highly motivated. Now, Stevenson, at age 41, who had a long amateur career, getting yet another chance at a championship. And trust me, she does not fight like somebody you would associate with being 41 years of age in boxing. She is got plenty in the tank. And Olivia Curry, a Chicagoan, who has a career in documentary film work, is a fascinating woman who is very serious about her boxing career, and she is a terrific fighter as well. And so the Australian and the American will battle it out on December 20th. It's on DAZN, and I hope that you will tune into it. Now, my other hot topic on this show is, and it's a hot topic because this seems to be developing a lot more on social media than I would think it might. Because people are generally obsessed with how people would do against people from previous generations, there's always a lot of talk about that. But in the process of all of that, and it's especially centered a lot on how on Joe Calzaghe and different matchups in the 168-pound division. A theme that has existed for a long time has become kind of predominant on a lot of social media, and that is the tendency of boxing fans, especially on my side of the pond in America, to devalue Joe Calzaghe, to not give him the full credit for who he was. And I am a big believer in the idea that Joe Calzaghe is one of the all-time greats. And that there is nobody at 168 pounds that he wouldn't be hell on wheels for. I've announced many Andre Ward fights, and Andre is fantastic. And I've talked to Andre about whether he ever would fight Joe Calzaghe and how he would fight him. It was a really fine show. And Andre was fascinating. And I think they would make a tremendous fight at 168. I don't know who would win that fight. Okay. And I don't know, and this is where people get on me, I don't know who wins the fight in his prime at 168 between Roy Jones Jr. and Joe Calzaghe. Now, I believe Joe Calzaghe is in that fight 100%. And I'll explain in a moment or two, because as many of you know, Joe Calzaghe did fight Roy Jones Jr. at light heavyweight. And there's a myth surrounding that fight, in my opinion. So this hot topic commentary by me is not even about comparing Joe Calzaghe and who would he beat and who might he beat. This is simply to set the record straight on him. He was 46-0 as a professional, 32 knockouts. He fought many champions and ex-champions during the course of his career. People have the perception, again, especially in America, that somehow he fought just a weak band of foes. He fought many very good European fighters that if Americans didn't know about them, that's on them. It's not on Joe Calzaghe. People like Robin Reed, who was a very good fighter. Let's take Chris Eubank. Of course, a world champion and an icon in Europe, and just period, an icon. Well, you know, when Joe Calzaghe was a young fighter and won his title against Chris Eubank and fought Chris Eubank was only 31 years of age. There's this perception that Chris Eubank was so far gone and shot. Well, it's true, Eubank only fought a few fights after that, but he was only 31 years old, and the fights he had after that were cruiserweight wars with Carl Thompson, in which he still fought well. So that was Joe Calzaghe's beginning, beating a legend in Europe. And then he defended his title against many good fighters, and then beat Jeff Lacey, who at the time was considered a monster at 168 pounds. All of the American media, all of them picked Jeff Lacey to beat Joe Calzaghe. And they bought in fully into this idea that Joe Calzaghe was less than we were told he was. Joe Calzaghe easily defeated Jeff Lacey, beat him in such a thorough fashion, it was astonishing. Now, I'm just going to say, I never thought Joe Calzaghe had a hopeless cause against Jeff Lacey. I always thought that fight, I actually thought it was going to be a very competitive, great fight. But I certainly felt like Joe Calzaghe could win it. And I thought he should be a slight favorite in that fight. Well, turned out it wasn't competitive. It was Joe Calzaghe dominating. And then in a shining moment, when both fighters were, although Kessler, Mikhail Kessler and Joe Calzaghe were in their primes pretty much, although Calzaghe was a little more toward the end of his career. So Kessler was the younger of the two fighters. They fought to a sold-out arena. And it was a major fight at 168, both champions. And Joe Calzaghe and Mikhail Kessler put on a phenomenal match. And Calzaghe won that fight. Move forward. Joe Calzaghe's right near the end of his career, okay? He's 36 years of age. And he is going to now fight a couple of American legends that he never got a crack at before. Roy Jones Jr. and Bernard Hopkins. Now, the Roy Jones Jr. fight is a flashpoint for everybody. And I've been in endless discussions about this on social media. Here are some facts that just need to be pointed out. Many people suggest that there is no way that if Roy Jones Jr. was absolutely in his prime, Joe Calzaghe could even hang in with him. Well, I want to point out that this wasn't a young Joe Calzaghe taking on a veteran Roy Jones Jr. This was 36-year-old Joe Calzaghe, taking on 39-year-old Roy Jones Jr. And Calzaghe would only fight two more fights, or I believe one more fight after that, the Hopkins fight. So this was Joe Calzaghe right at the end of his career, as Jones was outside of his prime. I'm not going to suggest that the 39-year-old Roy Jones was in his prime, but here's the point: he was only a year or two removed from his fights with Johnson and Tarver, Glenn Johnson and Antonio Tarver, losses that he had, but he was still considered one of the top light heavyweights in the world. And after he lost to Joe Calzaghe, Roy Jones Jr. then, in his next two fights, beat Omar Sheikha, who was a 31-year-old contender at 168, and Jeff Lacey, the man that Joe Calzaghe beat, who had only lost two times at that point, the fight to Calzaghe and a loss to Jermaine Taylor. So this idea that Joe Calzaghe, a young Joe Calzaghe, fought a faded Roy Jones, and it's the only reason he did anything good against him, is just not true. Of course, that version of Roy Jones Jr. wasn't the man of 8 years ago or whatever, or even maybe 5 or 6 years before. But he was still a viable light heavyweight contender. And it was Joe Calzaghe, by the way, moving up in weight. So my point of all of this is very simple. Joe Calzaghe is an all-time great. He passes the eye test as well as looking at records. He's a superb boxer. I saw him get up from a monstrous punch from Byron Mitchell, where he was knocked down in the first round. Monstrous punch. He got up and knocked Mitchell out in the very next round. So he had grit, he had ability, and enough power to get 32 knockouts in his 46 fights. So this is all about just reminding everybody who Joe Calzaghe was. And I think American fans need to just kind of look at it objectively and understand that this guy was something special and belongs in the pantheon of great fighters, especially great fighters in the 168-pound division. I'm glad you joined me for this Hot Topics. We'll see you next time.